Rev up your engines! Okay, Toyota Celicas. My old 94, as far as I'm concerned, that was the best year they made them. But then they came out with this design. That was the end of them. What went wrong? Well, I'll tell you one thing. It didn't go wrong with this particular model for one big reason. As you can see, it is a Celica GT. All the Zoom guys wanted the GTS. It's the same size as this. They're both 1.8 liter. But the Yamaha designed one had a real problem that it put its horsepower up at high RPMs. They didn't make the oil sump right. They'd scavenge, they'd suck air, and the engine would go boom. Every single customer I had with the GTS was either on their second or third engines. They couldn't take the extra horsepower with the design. Now, bigger oil pan, bigger sump, you can beef the engine up. It's basically the engine that they used to use in those baby Lotuses, but this one has a somewhat slower engine. It's still 1.8 liters, but it's not the Yamaha design. Here's all your specs on the engine. And this has less horsepower, but guess what? It lasts longer. This thing has over 203,000 miles, and she is the original owner. Her parents were accountants, and they got it to her to go to college, and she still has. She's put all 203,000 miles on the car. And does the engine burn oil? No, it still runs perfectly fine. This is all still pretty much bone stock. I don't know if her parents were mechanical geniuses, or since they were both accountants, they probably got this one because it costs less than the GTS. But in this case, you were better buying a cheaper car because it had the engine that would last longer. Because any way you look at these cars, they're much more sporty looking than the other ones were. But, okay, looks can be deceiving. This car looks a lot faster than it is. Now, with the GTS engine, they're a little bit faster, and they're still not really any type of race car. The problem was Toyota was always competing with Honda, and the Honda engines had tons more horsepower and torque. They kept making the Hondas, and Toyota finally just said, well, we're not going to make these anymore. And one of the other problems with them was, this was the last generation. The one I have in 94 is the second to last generation. And believe it or not, the last models of the second to last generation cost anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 more than the newer ones did. They were manufacturing them so much cheaper, they got thinner metal and stuff, which, you know, it's okay. This is held up. Still a Toyota. They learn how to rust-proof them. Hey, this thing's lived in Massachusetts and Connecticut its whole life. It's not rusted at all. So they know what they're doing when they build them. They're not going to rust out on you. But they're not any type of actual race car, and they were in a situation where they really didn't know what to do with the Celica. And Toyota and sports cars, let's face the facts, they gave up years ago. Toyota Supra, the new Supra, it's a BMW made in Germany. It has nothing to do with Toyota. And their other one is just a rebadged Subaru with a Subaru Boxer engine that's made by Subaru. Toyota's not in the sports car business anymore. That's not what they want. They make cars that people buy, SUVs that people want to buy, and they pretty much gave up on sports cars. They could have always sold a certain amount of them, you know, there's no arguing that. And unfortunately for Toyota, Mazda won the cuteness with their Mazda Miatas, and they're all drop tops. So Toyota messed around with a few convertibles, but that was never their thing. A lot of them were converted in California. That's not Toyota's ball game. So they pretty much gave up on these, even though they could run and run and run, because really this engine is pretty much the same thing as my wife's Matrix, and it still runs like a clock. You can cruise all day at 80 miles an hour or more if you want this thing. It's not a race car for racing, but the Celicas never really were. She wanted a red car. They got her this, 203,000 miles. It still runs like a clock. If you really want something to last forever, you get a standard transmission, a manual transmission. At 180,000 miles, granted that's a reasonable amount of mileage, the check engine light came on for the first time. Getting off the highway, and the car just wouldn't go up to speed. The transmission went out, and it ended up costing her $4,000. 180,000 miles, but if it had been a standard transmission, it wouldn't have had anything other than you got to put a clutch in them once in a while. The automatic transmissions are the weakest things in these cars. Hers finally just went out at 180,000 miles. She didn't change the filter or fluid in the transmission ever. I'm assuming that's probably one of the reasons it went out. Mine has 230,000 something miles on it. I changed the fluid every 30,000 miles, and it still works perfectly fine. So it went 180,000 miles, but if the filter and fluid had been changed like every 30, 40,000 miles, it probably wouldn't have gone out. The transmission would probably still be going, because from my experience with my own customers, I never had a transmission in a Toyota go out when I serviced them. This is why never ever listen to those idiots at the dealerships with modern cars that don't have dipsticks. Now this isn't modern enough. It's got a transmission dipstick in it. So you can check it and change it yourself. It's no big deal. But the new ones don't have dipsticks. And they say, oh, don't bother changing the fluid. It's a lifetime fluid. And then you say, okay, what does that mean? Well, the fluid's good for the lifetime of the transmission. You're like, okay, what's your warranty? Well, Toyota warranty's like 60,000 miles. Well, hers went 180 before it blew up, right? And she never changed the fluid. But they're only giving you 60,000 mile warranty. After that, it's your dollar. So you still want to change the filter and fluid. Even though you can't check it with a dipstick. Watch my videos. You can learn how to change it yourself. It's not that hard to do. You want them to last forever. Hey, but again, they are Toyota, so I suppose if you don't change it, maybe you'll get 180,000 before yours goes out. But hey, $4,000 is $4,000. I'd rather spend $50 here and there changing the fluid. Now, if you look closer, you'll see the back is shinier than the front. That's because she's been rear-ended twice. Guys did a good job fixing the car. You know, I wouldn't have noticed other than it's shinier than the rest of the car. You got to realize that these are basically Toyota Corolla chassis. Everything on them is pretty much fixable. The parts don't cost all that much money. Just like my wife's Matrix. Originally, the Matrix were called Toyota Corolla Matrixes, and they got rid of the Corolla and called them Toyota Matrixes, and they stopped making them. And now they made them again, and they're calling them Corolla hatchbacks. But hey, they're still Matrixes. Now, they don't make them Cambridge, Ontario anymore. They only make Lexuses there, but these were made in Japan. You can see, there it is, made in Japan. Look at the workmanship. I mean, it's still in excellent shape. Even the fancy seats, they're not too faded at all. That's one thing to be aware of. Yes, there isn't much room in the back seats. My old Celica 94, there wasn't much room in the back seat there. My son used to moan because he's 6'2". He had to sit back there when he was bigger, but hey, maybe that'd help get him out of the house when he turned 18, you know? Give kids some motivation these days. Don't hand them everything. Now, it does have new rims. Her husband got them for Christmas because the old ones are finally starting to corrode, and these are a lot sharper looking. But these things really, they look sporty, but they're not hard to maintain. She's been through 4 sets of tires. That means she's gotten 50,000 miles out of the tires each time. They're not particularly oddball sizes, so you can get these tires. It's not like you got a Porsche or something where the tires are going to be $500-600 up a piece. These are reasonable because it's just a common size. Other than the transmission, which I would have changed the fluid in it, everything else is still pretty much stock on it. Hey, the beauty cover isn't even cracked yet. They even used to make plastic better than they do today. Now, maybe some at all, but it's got a lot of computer stuff, so I'm going to do a scan of it. Now, this is an interesting scan tool. This is an X tool F401. As you can see, I wrote Japanese only. It only does Japanese cars, so it doesn't do all cars. But hey, for its price, it does a whole bunch of stuff. I hooked it up to my son's Corolla last year, and it said low on refrigerant. Well, the year before, I had added refrigerant, but I didn't change any of the codes. And it still remembered that in the past it had been low on refrigerant. And that's pretty good for a little handheld scan tool. Its remote just plugs in down there. And as you can see, it's very user-friendly. It's got a quick guide built in. What we're going to do is diagnosis, automatic identification. And while we're waiting, check it out. They got a little toy one here. Same color, it's pretty cool. Kept this car up. Look at the interior. It's still excellent. No cracks or anything. Now, I do have to say, she does garage this thing, and it's been taken care of. But even so, it goes out in the roads in the winter. She's her everyday driver, and it isn't rusted. Toyota coats these things pretty good. It doesn't have a rust problem. Now, scanning through the system. Well, read codes. There aren't any codes. Got no codes. Are there any pending codes? EVAP emission leak detected, small leak. She told me it's got a small leak. It's had it for years, but it works okay. She's had the EVAP canister changed, all kinds of stuff. So let's start it up. Let's look at some live data. Short-term fuel trim, 0%. That's amazing for a car this old. And as I said, you can see it's got 203,000 miles on it. Temperatures and everything is good. The oxygen center voltage output, it's a pretty good little scan tool. Now, it only works on Japanese cars. You can see here's a short-term fuel trim, bank 1 sensor 2, 99.2. 100 is perfect, so it's almost perfect. It's only a tiny bit off. So really, as old as this thing is, it's still in immaculate shape. We'll take it for a little road test. Brings it back to the good old days. Real parking brakes. And hey, tapes and CDs, and an FM AM radio. It's relatively low to the ground, so I'm going to go slow over this bump. I don't want to drag pieces of the plastic undercarriage off. So I'll go pretty slow here. And it didn't drag, so that's good. Well, the new transmission works fine. It's shifting like a dream. It is a small wheelbase car. You hit these bumpy roads. There goes the old toy car. We'll move that out of the way. But you hit bumps, you're going to feel it. It's a pretty short wheelbase, just like my wife's Matrix and my Celica. They are zippy and fun to drive around, but they're not the smoothest rides in the world. That's not what a sports car, especially of this size, is about. And she didn't change the fluid and filter all those years, or she probably wouldn't have had to fork out $4,000 for a new transmission. Now we come to a stop and clear on that side, clear on the other side. Here we go. And hey, it's got some zip to it. Shift smooth. It's a fun little zippy car to drive around. Not a race car, but seeing it has a less powerful engine, hey, 203,000 miles, runs that good and doesn't burn any oil. That's still the original engine. And of course, when you're cornering, they are fun to drive. They're zippy little corners. They're a lot of fun to fiddle around in. Now, since they were made less expensive than the older Celicas, they actually weigh a little bit more, and with the engine, they got even the smaller engine. It's got enough zip to have fun with. Responsive steering. Hey, sure, it's not a race car, but just up on the gas. It's got to rev up higher, but when that variable valve timing kicks in, it still takes off quite nicely. Now, when you consider this has 203,000 miles, and my wife's Matrix with the same engine just passed 100,000 miles, and they both run pretty much the same, hey, so that's going to last a long time, and this one, it's probably going to still last a long time, too. So, it was this model that led to the demise of the Celicas, but as you can see, this one has held up exceptionally well. The problem was they were competing in a segment they didn't want to compete in, and they screwed up with the Yamaha designed engine that this one doesn't have. So if you like style, you look at one of these, make sure you get a GT and not a GTS. Have a guy like me check it out, because I've seen guys put GT stickers on the back and take the GTS one off. Oh no, that's not the bad engine. You need a mechanic to check it out to make sure that somebody's not pulling a fast one. You find something like this with this kind of module with no rust, and this is Massachusetts, Connecticut, no rust. It's not like it was in Texas or Arizona. It was up north all this time, and it's still in excellent shape. So, even though they don't make them anymore, sad but true, this one certainly has held up over time. And I doubt people are saying, you think they're going to bring back the Celica? I don't think they ever will. Although, who knows, maybe some squirrely guy will come up with, let's make an electric Celica. You never know. After all, it's just a name. The modern Supra is a name that has nothing to do with Toyota Supra. It's a rebadged BMW. Names don't mean anything these days. As for this, it held up quite well. She's still the original owner. She wants to keep it forever. Who knows? Maybe she will. And guess what? It still gets 31 miles a gallon, showing the engine has practically no wear. Well, I knew that from the data because it was running at 99.2% efficiency out of 100%. So with that kind of mileage, it wouldn't surprise me it still gets that kind of gas mileage. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.